know if you have ever played shops. It's a really great game. You can lay out all of your toys and then pretend that you're keeping a shop. In today's story, Millie Molly Mandy keeps a shop, and that's the title of today's story. Millie Molly Mandy keeps shop. I hope you enjoy it. Once upon a time, Millie Molly Mandy was walking home from school with some of her little friends. Billy Blunt, Mrs. Muggins's Jilly, and of course, little friend Susan. And they were all talking about what they wanted to do when they were big. Billy Blunt said that he would like to have a motor bus and drive people to the station and put their luggage onto the bus. Mrs. Muggins's Jilly said that she would like to curl her hair and to be a lady who acts in the movies. Little friend Susan said that she wanted to be a nurse and look after babies and push a pram with 2 babies in it. Millie Molly Mandy said that she wanted to be a shopkeeper, like where Mrs. Muggins's worked, where she could sell sweets and cut pretty coloured stuff for people's dresses with a big pair of scissors. And, oh dear, said Millie Molly Mandy, I wish we didn't have to wait until we were all grown up. Then they came to Mrs. Muggins's shop, and Jilly said goodbye and went in. And then they came to Mr. Blunt's corn shop, which was only a few steps further on, and Billy Blunt said goodbye and went in. And then Millie Molly Mandy and little friend Susan, with their arms around each other, walked up the white road with the fields each side till they came to Mog's cottage. And little friend Susan said goodbye, and she went in. And Millie Molly Mandy went hoppity-skippity all alone down the road until she came to the nice white cottage with a thatched roof where Mother was at the gate waiting to meet her. Next day was Saturday, and Millie Molly Mandy went down to the village on an errand for Mother. And when she had done it, she saw Mrs. Muggins standing at her door, looking rather worried. And when Mrs. Muggins saw Millie Molly Mandy, she said, Oh, Millie Molly Mandy, would you mind running to ask Mrs. Jakes if she wouldn't mind to come and mind the shop for an hour or so? Tell her I've got some very important business and I don't know what to do. And Jilly's gone off picnicking. So Millie Molly Mandy went off and ran to ask Mrs. Jakes, but Mrs. Jakes said, Oh, tell Mrs. Muggins, I'm very sorry, but I've got 2 cakes in the oven and I just can't leave them. So Millie Molly Mandy ran back and told Mrs. Muggins, and Mrs. Muggins said, Oh, I wonder if Mrs. Blunt would come and mind the shop. So Millie Molly Mandy ran off to ask Mrs. Blunt, but Mrs. Blunt said, I'm ever so sorry, but I'm up to my eyes in cleaning, and I can't leave just now. So Millie Molly Mandy ran back and told Mrs. Muggins, and Mrs. Muggins said she didn't know who else that she could ask. Then Millie Molly Mandy said, Oh, Mrs. Muggins, couldn't I look after the shop for you? I could tell people that you will be back in an hour, and if they only want a sugar stick or something, I could give it to them. I know how much it is. Mrs. Muggins looked at Millie Molly Mandy and then said, Well, you're not very big, but I know you'd be very careful, Millie Molly Mandy. So she gave her lots of instructions about asking people if they would come back in an hour and not selling things until she was quite sure of the price and so on. And then Mrs. Muggins put on her hat and feather boa, and hurried off. And Millie Molly Mandy was left alone in the shop, in charge. Millie Molly Mandy was very solemn and very careful indeed. She dusted down the counter with a feather duster, and then she peeped into the window at all the handkerchiefs and socks and bottles of sweets, and she could see Mrs. Hubble arranging the loaves and cakes in her shop window opposite, and Mr. Smale, who had the grocer's shop, with a little counter at the back where you posted parcels and bought stamps and letter paper. And Milly Molly Mandy felt so pleased that she had a shop to look after as well. And then suddenly the door jangled. And who should come in but little friend Susan? And how little friend Susan did stare when she saw Milly Molly Mandy behind the counter. Mrs. Muggins, said Milly Molly Mandy, Mrs. Muggins has gone on very important business and she will be back in an hour. What may I help you with? said Milly Molly Mandy. A packet of safety pins, said little friend Susan. What are you doing here? said little friend Susan. I am looking after the shop, said Milly Molly Mandy. And I know where the safety pins are, because I bought some yesterday. So Milly Molly Mandy wrapped up the safety pins in a piece of brown paper and twisted the ends, just as Mrs. Muggins did. And she handed the packet to little friend Susan, and little friend Susan handed her a penny. And then little friend Susan said, I want to play shops with you. But Milly Molly Mandy shook her head very solemnly and said, No, no, little friend Susan. This isn't play. This is business. I've got to be very, very careful. And I have been put in charge, not you. You'd better go, little friend Susan. And then the bell jangled again and a lady came in. So little friend Susan did go out. But she was peering through the window just to see how Milly Molly Mandy was doing. The lady was Miss Bloss, who lived opposite over the baker's shop. She lived there with Mrs. Bloss. Miss Bloss wanted 1/4 yard of pink flannelette because she was making a wrapper for her mother. Now I think a wrapper might be a scarf. And she hadn't bought quite enough for the collar. And she didn't like to waste a whole hour till Mrs. Muggins came back. So Milly Molly Mandy stood on one leg and wondered what to do, and Miss Bloss tapped with one finger and also wondered what to do. And then Miss Bloss said, That's the roll of flannelette that it came off. I'm quite sure Mrs. Muggins wouldn't mind if I took some more. So between them, and I'm going to show you the picture. So between them, they measured off the pink flannelette, and Milly Molly Mandy fetched Mrs. Muggins's big scissors. There they are. Fetching the big scissors. And Miss Bloss made a crease exactly where the 1/4 yard came in. And Milly Molly Mandy breathed very hard and cut slowly and carefully right across the crease to the end. And then they wrapped the piece of material together. Ask Miss Muggins to send me the change when she gets back, said Miss Bloss, handing over 1/2 crown. And then for a time nobody came into the shop. So Milly Molly Mandy amused herself by trying to find the rolls of stuff that different people's dresses had come off. There was one of her very own pink and white striped cotton, and Mother's checked apron stuff, and Mrs. Jake's Sunday gown. Ooh, I'll show you the picture again because I think we can see. Oh, look. Can you see just here? How can we look? Oh, it's very confusing. Just there, can you see the different materials? Then there was a rattle and a jangle again. And who should come in but Billy Blunt? "I'm Miss Muggins," said Milly Molly Mandy. "What do you want to buy?" "Where's the real Miss Muggins?" said Billy Blunt. So Milly Molly Mandy had to explain again. "I am in charge of the shop." And then Billy Blunt said, "Well, I want a pennyworth of aniseed balls." So Milly Molly Mandy had to stand on a box and she had to reach the jar of sweets down from a very high shelf. Aniseed balls were 12 for a penny. Milly Molly Mandy knew that, which was very helpful because she often bought them. So she counted them out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And Billy Blunt said, "You've got one too many there." So Milly Molly Mandy counted again. 1, 2. And she did find she did actually add 13. So she took a sweet back out again and put it back in the jar. Not very hygienic. And then she put the others into a bag and swung it round by the corners, just as she had seen Mrs. Muggins doing, and she gave it to Billy Blunt. And Billy Blunt gave her the penny. And then Billy Blunt grinned and said, "Good morning, Mum." And Milly Molly Mandy said, "Good morning, sir." And Billy Blunt went out. After that, an hour began to seem rather a long time for Milly Molly Mandy, with the sun shining outside. But at last there was another jingle jangle, and Mrs. Muggins finally returned. And Milly Molly Mandy thought that although she had enjoyed herself quite a lot, she thought perhaps she would wait until she was a grown-up before she kept shop for herself. And that's the end of the second story on Milly Molly Mandy Keeps Shop. Now, here are your activities. What I think you might like to do is draw. Can you see that? Can you see that? Draw a set of jars and try to think what sweets might go into the jars. I've started it off by, can you see, I've got some sherbet lemons. Can you see those sherbet lemons? I love a sherbet lemon, and so does my daughter. So see if you can draw some jars, and then you've got to do some research, and you've got to ask Nanny, Grandad, your mum, your dad, what kinds of sweets were there in olden times? And then, if you'd like to do some more research, there's a really good programme on at the moment called Back in Time for the Corner Shop. Back in Time for the Corner Shop. Can you see that? And it starts in the Victorian times, up there, and it goes all the way through into modern times. And you might get some ideas about the types of things that would go into jars. So you could do a little bit of history research by watching some really lovely television programmes all together. And you might like to do that. Right, well, that's it from me today. And so I'm going to say goodbye, and I'll see you again soon. Goodbye. Take care. See you soon. Bye.